you feeling stuck, lost, tired, or uninspired? We've all been there, including myself. I'm Coach Des, mindset motivator and lifestyle entrepreneur. I'm here to tell you that the best, unapologetic, and limitless version of yourself is yet to come. The Born Unbreakable podcast is here to inspire just that. With motivating guests from all different walks of life and around the world, their stories will empower you to unlock abundance and your unbreakable spirit. Do you need accountability? Reach out to me for a free consultation of how I can support you in reaching your maximum potential. This episode is brought to you by Korma Date Coffee, the healthy alternative to coffee. This delicious date coffee has the health benefits of giving you natural energy, antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, and fiber. Best of all, Korma is caffeine-free, no jitters, no anxiety, and no afternoon crash. Go to kormacafe.com, that's KORMACAFE.com, and enter discount code BORNUNBREAKABLE at checkout to get 10% off your order. Welcome to the Born Unbreakable podcast. I've been looking forward to this episode to interview my guest today, Mike Malatesta, who is many things. He's an entrepreneur, first and foremost. So we're absolutely going to be talking about entrepreneurship today. He's also a fellow podcaster. So I very much admire that because he knows exactly what it takes to host a podcast and do all of the things to manage one. So I'm in a good company here. He's a trusted advisor and he's also an author. So we'll be talking about his book. He's helped to start, grow, and sell 2 successful waste management companies that sold in the 8 and 9 figures, which is very impressive. He helps entrepreneurs to get unstuck, take back their power, and achieve their business and personal objectives to create the future that they want. The name of his podcast is How'd It Happen, which I think is brilliant.
Thank you.
So he talks about with entrepreneurs and actually people from all walks of life, how they achieve their success. So definitely the first ask that I'm going to have of you today is to go out wherever you listen to podcasts, whether that's Apple or Spotify or Stitcher, to go ahead and subscribe or follow How'd It Happen so you can tune in to Mike. He has over 250 episodes. I personally have listened and a lot of value add. So if you're looking to grow in leadership, success principles, this is a great one to add to your repertoire. And he is also the author of the book Owner Shift: How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck, which is another brilliant title. So you're so good at titling, Mike, but thank you for coming on the show today. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Des, thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this as well. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do this. Well, the place that I would love to start is your personal story. So entrepreneurship is obviously where you are. It's your bread and butter. I know you help entrepreneurs today, but did you envision when you were growing up that this is where you'd see yourself? Like, tell me a little bit of your backstory.
Yeah, so kind of, sort of. When I was 4 years old, my parents and I and my sisters, we lived across the street from a construction company. And I remember sitting on the curb in the summers, in the afternoons, and I would just be watching the men bring their equipment back. And everything about it, the noise and the smoke and the smell and the guys themselves were exciting to me. And I'm sitting there thinking, what is this? I could understand the activity, but I didn't really understand what was going on. But I thought to myself that whatever was happening there, that was like the coolest thing in the world to me. So it was like my own sort of coolness on the curb in front of the house, Des. And so I think the kind of sort of thing is, I think that there was an entrepreneurial seed planted in me on that curb, watching what was happening and trying to make a 4-year-old sense out of what is a business. Um, but then, life kind of went on and we moved, and I went to school, and, grade school, high school, college, and kind of all of that just was way back here. It's just in the background. I never thought of it. When I got to college, at least, so I went to college in the mid '80s, and there really wasn't anyone talking about starting a business that I was hanging out with. Everyone was, it was about, get a job or go to get an advanced degree, a law degree, a medical degree, an MBA, something like that. And by the time I was ready to graduate, I had no interest in doing more school. But along the way, between my junior and senior years, I got a job driving a garbage truck. And so I kept my love of trucks the whole time, but the whole business thing was like way back there, as I said. So I got a job driving a garbage truck, and I, it, it was amazing to me how much I appreciated that business, learning that business, at least from a driver's standpoint. And it just intrigued me as something that I could do and, sort of like. And so I got a job as a management trainee after college with a very large trash company. And I moved around for, I sort of had this say yes to everything, so whenever they asked me to do something new, I said yes. It was just immediate. And so I moved around and I moved up, and I was, on my way to, I thought, being a lifer, and being a career, becoming an executive, and being a career executive there, maybe the CEO one day. But about 5 years into that, um, I got a call from my boss, and the short story was, he came up to see me that afternoon. We had a little chit chat. It was about me getting fired. So this dream that I had about moving up and maybe being the CEO um, got sort of crushed that day. And uh, I went through so that's hard, right? That was hard. But what was great about it, and that's where this kind of sort of thing comes in, is, a few months after that, I met a guy. His name was Butch. He said, "Hey, I've been thinking about this, and maybe if you want to start a business, we could start a business together." And I was like, well, first of all, it came out of left field, but second of all, I was like, wait a second, this seed that was planted in me when I was 4 years old, maybe this guy has come along to kind of water it. That's how I think about it now. Germinate it, fertilize it, and ultimately, that's what we did. We ended up starting a trucking company for, a waste trucking company, and yeah, and we were off to the entrepreneurial on the entrepreneurial journey, I guess, Des.
Wow. That is incredible to go from your losing your job,
Yeah.
basically, about to then starting a company. That's a big shift.
Yeah, 6 months from the time that I was fired to the time we started. Yeah, and not knowing anything, of course, and not having thought about it even, ever seriously beyond what a 4-year-old thinks about these things.
Yeah. Well, and that leads me to a question, which is there's different people that are tuning in to the show.
Mhm.
Those that may have their own business, a lot of entrepreneurial spirits, but some who are in the space of thinking of if they should,
Yeah.
because they have a passion. There's something that they've been noodling on. It's been brewing in the back of their mind that maybe it starts off as many people do, as a side hustle,
Right.
which then blossoms into a bigger business. But one of the biggest challenges is getting started. And to your very point, you don't know everything.
Yeah.
So what would you say to that person who's kind of in that struggle of getting started as you think back to when you started your first company?
Well, um, what so I was kind of like, out of options, right? I didn't I my career had been halted, and I was kind of just in a position where I needed something to do, right? So it's maybe a little bit different than someone who's going along with a job and sort of has this thought that maybe, or they're doing a side hustle, or they're sort of experimenting with it. But nonetheless, I think what I would say, um, knowing what I know now, is until it's really eating away at you in your gut to do this, I wouldn't do it, because um, this sort of back of the head, back of the mind sort of idea, that's not enough. If you get into it with just that, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough if you get into it, when it's really strong in your gut. But there's I think, a certain commitment that comes with that feeling, where your brain is already convinced that you can make it, which, by the way, isn't enough, but it's enough to get started. Whereas
Mhm.
the other is sort of like, not your brain's not fully committed to it. And I just feel like if you're not fully committed to it, it's going to be easy for you to not make it.
Yeah. It might be easy for you to make excuses though,
Oh, sure.
because
Well,
I think
about why you
that
didn't make
happens
it. Sure, of
is
course.
right.
Yeah, right. There's no room for excuses though in the
Yeah,
entrepreneurial life. That's the thing. Um, plenty of entrepreneurs
that is the
make them,
thing.
but there's no room for them because you're really in charge. If you're a real entrepreneur, the blame is only one place for anything, and that's right at your feet. So you got to deal with that.
Yeah. Well, and this, you know, I'm gonna ask this question, and I've interviewed so many entrepreneurs, and I don't think I've ever asked this question, but just hearing you talk is making me think this, which is, can anybody really be an entrepreneur?
Well, I believe that if you're one of the 5% of the people in the world who's willing to do what the other 95% aren't willing to do, then the answer is yes. Um, Regardless of your background or where you came from or what your parents did or what your career has been so far, if you're willing to do that, and you have you know, you don't have to have a monumental idea. You just have a decent idea and you execute it, and you're willing to do, um, what I think only 5% at the most of people are willing to do, then yes. I don't think I was born an entrepreneur. I don't think a lot of people were born it. Something happens along the way that they happen to be paying attention to, or they can't ignore, that flips the switch.
Yeah. Yeah, that is good. So, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about in learning about your story is, how did you know when it was the right time for you to sell the businesses that you started and grew?
Hmm. Well, the first one, how did I know it was time? Um, what happened was I had partners for the whole time that we had the business from the very beginning. Great partnership, that lasted. We were 20 years in our partnership, and my two partners. I had two remaining partners, and they were both, um, let's say, 15 years older than I was. So I was sort of the young person. So they stuck around for all this time, and now they wanted to, they wanted to get the reward. And I wanted that too, because I wanted to own the business, 100%, for the first time, ever. And so that was in 2013. We put a deal together to buy them out, and it was great. They got, a very nice return, and I was, the 100% owner of the business. Um and I was really happy with that. I was really happy with that. Now, the on the one hand, on the other hand, we had to borrow a lot of money in order to facilitate that. And so we had to borrow a lot of money to pay those shares out, and that caused us to not be able to grow, particularly by acquisition, like we had been able to grow prior. And I was fine with that too, although it wasn't as exciting for me as maybe it had been, because that's a part that I enjoyed. I enjoyed finding businesses to buy and doing the, you know, figuring out how to get a deal done, figuring out how to integrate it into the company and do all the and meet all kinds of great new people along the way. So we weren't able to do that, which was, as I said, was fine. But then um, in it's 2014, a large company came along and said they were interested in ours. And at first, I dismissed it because I hadn't been um, intentionally planning for that. So I just thought, well, that's nice, but we're just going to keep doing it, and then doing our thing. And then that was around Thanksgiving, Des. And then over the Christmas holiday, I started thinking about it a little bit more, and I started doing some, um, projections, and I just sort of modeled it out. And I also thought to myself, it was the first time in a long time that we didn't have anything else going on in the business. So, like, we weren't being, this is going to sound weird, but we weren't being sued by anybody, and we weren't in any we didn't have any regulatory issues, and it's a lot of things that go along with the waste business. We just didn't have anything, which was unusual to not have anything. And so I did that modeling. I thought about that, and then I re-engaged with them, and I said, look, if we can, I think the business is worth this. If we can get to that number, we'll consider it. And the short story is, they got to that number, we considered it, and that's how we ended up selling the business.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's the first story. Do you want the second story as well?
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, it's not, it's not always that people get to that point, and there could be somebody listening today with a business and have not even thought about selling
Yeah.
their business to any interested party.
Well, that's a great point. And I did say that I was not being intentional about selling the business, and I think it's an important distinction for people to th- to understand, that even though I wasn't intentionally marketing the business, we had been preparing to sell the business for a long, long time. And I don't mean we were preparing to bring it to market. We were preparing our business to be marketable. In other words, we had, our systems and processes were all written down, and they were documented. We had our financial statements were audited, and they were amazingly detailed, and there was no funny business in them, right? There was no, like, a lot of companies have all kinds of funny business going on in their stuff. We didn't have any of that. We had a good management team, like capable, competent management team. We had, we just had a lot of things that we had over the years known that we need to have in order for us to eventually, one day, if it were to happen, be prepared to sell the business, because selling a business is not an easy thing to do. You usually hear the stories about what people walk away with in terms of money, but that's the end of the process, and getting there is very painstakingly difficult and challenging. It seems weird, like it'd be easy to sell something, but it's not, because when people are spending a lot of money for something, they really want to know a lot about it. They really want to be sure. So anyway, that was just an aside on that. I think that's important for people to know. On the second time that we started a business, the first time I would call it like a bootstrap, just nose to the grindstone thing. Like I'd been fired, got together with this other guy, we put all of our money up and we just went to work. The second time I was able to partner with a private equity firm on an idea. I had an idea that we could do this similar type of business, but we could grow it by acquiring businesses, establishing a foundation or platform, and then leveraging that to build a nice business. And we did that, and we were fortunate to get that all put together. And in a very short period of time, less than 3 years, all in, we just happened to attract a lot of attention and interest. And so we decided to sell the business, but this time we used an investment banking firm. We put a whole, what's generally referred to as a process together. We sort of created an auction for the business, and it just so happened that the waste business or the environmental business is sort of on this, riding the ESG sort of wave right now, which it wasn't when the first time I sold. And there's just all this interest of companies that want to invest in those types of businesses for whatever reason. So we were fortunate to ride the wave of that, Des, and we got just tremendous interest, and in a short period of time we were able to select someone and sell that business for a really, really nice return for everyone.
Wow. Yeah. I love hearing these stories. I love it because you're showing the arc really of entrepreneurship is this idea and innovation, how something starts, building something, and all of the facets that go into whether it makes sense for somebody to want to sell.
Right.
Because sometimes somebody may not even think about that until they're approached to say, "Hey, have you thought about this?" Because you know what I mean?
Excuse me, I do. And I think in my experience, at least, it's most of the time they don't think about it at all. And then someone comes along and they get really excited about it because someone's, intimated that they're going to pay a nice number for the business or something. But then, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of hard work that goes into selling a business. And if you're not prepared for it before someone comes along and offers you something for it, two things are probably going to happen. One, you're going to be very, very frustrated because you're just not anticipating all the things that someone will ask you for and need, and all the time that will be required. And the second thing is you're probably not going to, I don't want to say you'll be taken advantage of, because that's probably too strong, but you will not be on the strength side of the negotiation typically, because you just haven't prepared for it. So preparing.
Mm-hmm.
So my thing that I try to tell everybody is get prepared to sell the business and operate it like you're going to sell it, even if you don't think you'll ever sell the business, because your business, not only will you be ready if someone does come along or you do decide to sell, but your business will run better than it ever will if you don't engage in that exercise, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would just imagine that if you went so far to at least plan for it, even if you weren't, you become so thorough because you are thinking about that possibility of the kinds of things that people ask. It's like when I watch, which I think people are familiar with this, when you watch the show Shark Tank.
Yeah.
Which in that case, you're just looking for investors into your business, not necessarily selling your business, but there's all these questions that someone asks you, about the valuation of it and the return on your investment and how much it costs to make a product. And before they, so they know your margin. I mean, there's all these things that you get asked. So you have to be prepared for somebody who is willing to, to have any kind of partnership with you. And I think that's similar when you're in that journey to
definitely
a sale,
definitely similar.
Important.
Yeah, because they are investing in your business. They're buying it, but they're really investing in it. That's what they're doing. So yeah, great. That's a great example.
Hmm.
Yeah, watch
Yeah.
Shark Tank.
Well,
If you can't
so then
answer
so you've
if you
gone.
can't answer the Shark Tank questions, you're probably not ready to sell your business.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, because
good
I
example.
see that, and
Yeah,
I see the difference too, where there's some people who are so thorough, they know the numbers like the back of their hand, and that's why they have different people that are in different lanes. There's a creative person and the strategy person, there's a finance
yeah.
person, and they've got all of that. And then there's some people who get asked questions and they're like deer in the headlights. Like I don't even know how to answer you,
Right, right,
you
right.
know.
They show you the whole
So
spectrum, so yeah.
it's a good. Yeah, yeah, but it's fun though. It's a fun way to see, like, very quickly the kinds of things that people are thinking through. Um, but I'm really curious because you've obviously gone through that experience, but then how did you get into the business of helping entrepreneurs? So how did you make that decision to wanna help people in their journeys?
Yeah, the 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 book is the short answer. Like, I've been
Yeah,
helping and working with entrepreneurs sort of casually and in peer-to-peer groups and that kind of thing for a long time. Um, but
yeah.
when I after I wrote the book, people would read it and just reach out and ask me if I, did coaching or advising or whatever you want to call it. And I thought to myself, well,
Mm,
um, I really haven't. It wasn't an intention of mine, but once people started asking, it occurred to me that um, it's always like having a business is always about what are if people are willing to reach out to you and they're willing to invest for something that you have, then it might be a business. And so I just use that. I don't know, we call it market research, and it told me that my experiences and what I've been through and how I see the world and how I see people and situations and might be valuable to entrepreneurs who are looking to um, you know get bigger, accomplish something they haven't before, get unstuck if they're stuck, fix their help them fix how they see the world. um, just make them. What I'm really trying to do is help entrepreneurs create the futures they want rather than the futures that they think they're going to get as a result of their journey, and then make that future happen.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things you mention, as it relates to your book, is being in the valley of uncertainty
Yeah,
and then having to make a shift.
yeah,
Can you talk about what that was for you?
sure. Well, in October of 2003, my partner Butch, who I had mentioned earlier, the one who sort of came to me originally with this idea to start a business, um, he was burned very badly in a fire at one of our facilities, and a couple of days later, he passed away from the injuries that he suffered. And we were about 11 years into the business at that point, and we'd had plenty of good things happen, but we'd had plenty of real significant challenges, and then this, which was by far the most significant challenge that we'd ever faced. And I was really that when that happened, I was already um, sort of ground down to nothing. And when Butch passed away, I that's when I describe in the book as dropping into this place I call the valley of uncertainty. And that I call it that because I think now that would my whatever my circumstances were that led me there are my own, but I think based on my experience with a lot of entrepreneurs is they all or most all of them at one point or another have a combination of circumstances uh, in their business or in their personal life or both that cause them to end up in a similar valley. And the valley is a place where you know you I call it the place where entrepreneurs go to feel sorry for themselves. They go there to expire. They go there to question the world. They go there to blame somebody. They go there to do everything except what um, they're uniquely built have the responsibility to do. And so easy. So yeah, that's what it is. W- why it was beneficial for me to name it um, was one to make it sort of normal, because I think it is normal. Um, but also to by naming it, I was able to sort of figure out, okay, how did I get there, and then what happened along the way that helped me get out of there. And um, it, I think that a lot of entrepreneurs get there, as I said, and they stay there. They they don't figure out a way to get out of there, and the valley becomes just their existence. So in the book, I separate the entrepreneurial journey, into four sections, and the valley is number three. That's the break section. So you start off in the dream section, where that's when that gut's really calling you, Des, right? It's saying, your brain's saying, you got to do this, right? And then you convince yourself that it's going to be great. Everything's going to work out fine. And boy, if you can stay there, you're in great shape. But most of us don't stay there. We move on to what I call the grind stage. And the grind stage is when all of the stuff that you never even anticipated, thought about, or contemplated in the dream stage it comes knocking, and it needs an answer. Just all the stuff that comes with running a business. And that starts to wear away at that dream, to a point where you don't even sometimes know what the hell you got into this for in the first place. So it's really, really hard. And if you're not, if you are not actively uh, building back upon what the everyday grind is taking away from you, you end up broken at one point. And that's the break stage. That's where the valley is. Um, and that's a bad spot to be. But like I said, I think it's a place where most of us end up at some point. And then, um, so the question is then, okay, well, if that's where I'm at, is this where I'm going to stay? And if I am going to stay here, I'm going to have a lot of company, because a lot of entrepreneurs do that. They just stay there. And that's why businesses either stay the same or they start getting smaller. Just the whole effort, the whole job of being an entrepreneur has been wiped away from that particular entrepreneur, and so they're no longer doing what they're supposed to be doing, creating a bigger, better future for themselves and for everybody around them. Instead, they're just trying to just get through the day and hold on to what they have. Um, and so, and the fourth stage is breakthrough, and that's where that's where I was able to get, fortunately, and that's where I want everybody to get, because the reality is, at least in my view, you may not be happy about being in the valley, but if you see it and recognize it as the place that you designed yourself to be, so you orchestrated it, you architected it, you designed it, you designed a system in your business that ended up putting you there in the valley. Um, if you don't like that, which I hope you don't, but if you don't like that, the good news is that if you were able to design the system that was so perfect to put you there, and that's not where you want to be, the chances are that with some help, you can design a system that pulls you out of there and gets you where you do in fact want to be. So you already have the power. you have the power. So are you going to use the power that you have to redesign, to get out of the valley, or are you going to just give in to uh, not recognize the power you have any longer and just stay put? Um, so that's the valley.
Wow. Don't stay in the valley.
Yeah, don't stay.
Everyone.
Yes.
Don't
Good
don't don't
advice.
do that. That's amazing. Well, I started listening to this book. It made me think about it, what you were saying. And now it's making me want to get through it faster based on everything you just said. But it's by Adam Grant,
Oh,
and it's called Think Again. And the whole concept of think again is that sometimes we get very stuck in our thinking. It's natural, right?
yeah, it is.
And it's difficult for us to get out of our own way, our own thinking, to be open minded. And we tend to want to preserve. There's like this primitive brain that wants to preserve what we know. And so we vacillate back and forth between that and innovation and kind of getting outside of a rut and going forward. One of the examples that he talked about in the book that I can recall is like the person who invented the BlackBerry.
Mm.
And like one of the things that they were struggling through was because it was awesome at first,
Yeah,
focus on your work emails. It was great. I had a BlackBerry
so
at
did
one
I.
point in my consulting career, and I thought it was awesome. This is great. Love the BlackBerry. But then here comes along this company called Apple, I think
Mhm.
something.
Yeah.
So Apple comes along and has this idea to make basically a little computer that you could hold in your hand. And the owner of the or inventor of the BlackBerry was like, that's too much, you know, like making a browser, like how fast is it really going to go? And all these different questions. So, needless to say, we know where that went, right? But the whole concept of think again is that, if you don't, if you stay in the valley, you're not going to get to the place where you're going to have these new ideas or how you look at the same problem and learn to attack it with a different frame of mind.
Yeah.
And essentially, that's what your competitors are doing every day. Whether you're a sandwich shop and you're trying to be the better sandwich shop or the coffee shop or something down the street, or you're in the retail space or a service space. I mean, there's always going to be this competition. There's always going to be, innovation that is just waiting, and ingenuity that's just out there waiting to be unlocked or unleashed. So I love you talking about the valley because that's exactly where so many of the famous entrepreneurs that we've been exposed to have been.
Yeah. And that's a great example on the BlackBerry. I'm glad you brought up Adam Grant because they it was like, "Oh, that's too much," and then it was that nobody's gonna wanna type without a keyboard. Um, it's just never gonna work because of these things. They'd say, "Well, you know, it's really just like a glorified iPod, right? It's just a bigger music
Right.
player." And
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah. Who can pay attention to this?
one of the things that leads leads us into the valley and gets us to stay there too are these stories that we tell ourselves based on our experiences. I call them fallacies. We we have something happen and we tell ourselves a story about it. That story is truth, right? That's what we call truth. And we hold on to that
Mhm.
for a really long time. And we tell ourselves that truth is a truth. That story is a truth. And that's just the way it is. And what I discovered when I was in the valley was that a lot of these truths that I was telling myself were really just untruths. I call them fallacies. They were just stories that I had told myself about things that um, maybe they even were true at one time. But the thing about truth is like it's just what you tell yourself it is. And I'd been telling myself things like, asking for help is like cheating, right? Because that's kind of how school is, right? You come up and
Right.
you take a test, and if you ask for help, you get in trouble. um, I've been so that's one example of things I've been telling myself, and so I was always like, I got to figure this out on my own. I have to figure this out on my own because getting help is cheating, and I would tell myself that over and over, and I believed it. Well, that's just not true. Um, and I had a number of these fallacies that I talk about in the book, and I think everyone has these as well. They just, you're just so close to something and you've built a belief system around it, and without someone pointing it out to you, you don't even recognize it. You just and it perpetuates and it really affects your belief system, and it gets you, to me it's a big reason why another big reason why people get stuck and stay there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love my favorite part of your book title is how getting selfish got me unstuck.
Right.
I want to ask you about that. What was it? What was the catalyst
Yeah.
for that? I think that's really powerful, and I'm sure there's a lot of people thinking like, "Ooh,
Yeah.
that's intriguing."
Well, thanks for asking. Yeah, it's kind of, it's one of those things where we've been taught that the word selfish is a horrible word. Um,
Mhm.
and it kind of is the way that we've traditionally defined it or assigned it to people. That we look at people that we think are egotistical or conceited, and we call them selfish. And maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But what I found when I was in the valley, that part of the reason that I was there was because I was selfless. I was taught and I believed, like these fallacies, for example, that I was talking about. I was taught and I believed that my role as the entrepreneur and as the leader of the company was to put everybody before me. Um, make everyone's problem more important than my problem, be the person that all the problems had to come to so that I could prove my value and solve those problems. Um, and I could go on and on and on about that, but the what I recognized with some help was that um, the 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 reason that I was relying on this notion of being selfless was because um, I'd convinced myself in the dream stage and the grind stage of the business that that's what was necessary. And maybe it was, but I never realized when that was no longer necessary. Um, and as a result, I built a system for myself that was based on, you know, responsiveness, and was based on being the hero and, putting out fires and all these sort of cliches that you hear. But what I was really doing was um, avoiding the work that I was really supposed to be doing, right? The work that I was really supposed to be doing was figuring out what I wanted out of this business, getting really clear about it, and then creating a story for everyone, and then a system and a process for everyone to help us get to that future, the future we wanted to own. And by being selfless, I was avoiding that work. I was avoiding the work that I was supposed to be doing because it's hard. And it's easier to just create something that I could use as an excuse. I don't have time to do that because I've got all this stuff coming at me all the time. Does that sound familiar? Probably sounds familiar to a lot of people. I don't have time. So for that, the reason I use that as the subtitle for the book is that I needed to become selfish before I could be really effective as a selfless leader. Like, like anyone can be a selfless leader and be completely ineffective at their job.
Yeah.
But I just and as I was being that, I was that. But by getting selfish, getting clear, getting focused, however you want us to say it, was the way for me to get out of the valley, begin to break through, figure out what I wanted my future to look like, and then get to work owning that, making that future my property, like mine, not anybody else's. So that's what I mean by selfish.
Mhm.
Does it make sense?
I think it's brilliant.
Okay.
It makes so much sense, and I love it. I think it's provocative because you're absolutely right. I think many people want to be pillars of service, myself included.
Yeah.
I mean, I say it all the time. I do this because I feel more fulfilled doing for others that is something bigger than myself.
Right.
You know, coaching and helping people is allowing me to help people fulfill their dreams, their goals, their wishes, their desires, their wants. But you're right. When you don't have focus, you don't have clarity, you can't do that job.
Yeah.
You're unable to effectively execute your talents, your gifts, your, abilities when you don't have everything in order for yourself. So I think it's vitally important to pay attention, and to continue paying attention. It's something I look at as iterative. It's not just like a one-time thing,
Mm.
and that's why you are having to evaluate regularly. Where are you? Where do you want to be? What do you need to do differently? And that's actually in service of others.
Yeah. And
So
if you can
I
pull
love
it
it.
off, if you can pull it off without anyone thinking that you are egotistical, that you are conceited, then that's where the magic happens, right? So I just want to be
Mhm,
clear on that. If you I the way I define selfish is very particular. Um, and
mhm.
it's not, it's not the person who's, it's all about me, even though it is all about you, because it has to be all about you in order for it to be about other people. So get clear on it, and then you can be selfless. Don't be selfless first and expect that that's going to lead to the promised land, or however you define that, because that's going to be tough and you're going to be frustrated and
Yeah,
yeah.
I agree. I totally agree with that. So then what led you to start your podcast?
Well, after I sold the first business we talked about, Des, I was looking for something creative to do, and I'd always been interested in writing, um, just as a hobby, I guess, more than anything else. So I started writing a blog, and it was such a lot of work. There was a lot of work to, painstaking over an idea and trying to articulate that in a way that was interesting to people. And um, while I loved the exercise part of it, I really didn't feel like people cared. I didn't feel like people were noticing. I didn't feel like reading was the way to writing, and then expecting someone to read it was the way to, for me to get better at expressing my ideas or exploring my curiosity. And so I'd been listening to podcasts for a little while, and I thought to myself, well, maybe I'll try this, because I feel like it's a great, you know, I'm I felt like I was pretty decent having, conversations with people, and I thought, if nothing else, doing the podcast would give me an opportunity to explore my own curiosity, and if that's all I got out of it, then that would be a win for me, because I would learn something, meet new people, and explore my curiosity. And that's how I got into it initially. And then as I went along, it became clear to me that the people that I was talking to, could really, significantly impact a lot of people. And so I started to get a little clearer about what my mission was in doing the podcast. And ultimately I came to, um, my mission really is to dig deep into stories of success, to get to the clues of how it happened and why it mattered. Um, and I'm, with every show that I do, I want to inspire, activate, and maximize the greatness that's already in everybody that's listening or watching. Um, but it's in there, but it's just not activate it, I guess that's the biggest word out of there. It's one thing to inspire someone, but it's a whole nother thing for the person to activate, because the person has to activate themselves. I don't think you can inspire someone into greatness. They have to activate. Maybe you'll use a different word, but I use activate. And so that's what I'm trying to do with every episode. And you mentioned at the beginning, I've got over 250 so far, and um, it's just really fulfilling. Well, first of all, it's great to be able to talk to people, like talk to you, talk to all these people that I never would have otherwise met. Um, and explore their stories in a way that you never have time to do at a cocktail party or a networking event or
Mm-mm.
whatever. Um, and then share it with everybody, and have people say, something nice about it, um, or leave you a nice review, or do something. Like you said at the beginning, we talked about entrepreneurs, whether they're born or whatever. If we can activate someone to do something that they wouldn't have otherwise done, because the guests that they listened to resonated with them as being just like them at some point in their life. And this is what they did. And if they can do that, I can do
Mhm.
that. So that's why I do the podcast.
I love it. I love the premise of the show. I love the guests that you have on, and it adds so much value. I love so much how you've created that platform, and yeah, I'm excited to have found it, because it's something
Thank
that
you.
I would absolutely continue pointing people to, for sure. But I want to spend these last couple minutes, Mike, asking you a few questions for people to just get to know you a
Okay.
little better. And it's so aligned, you sharing the valley and you sharing the breakthrough, that hopefully everybody feels encouraged to get to, if you feel like you're in the valley right now, because if you are, Mike and I have both been there.
Yes.
So you're not alone, but the whole goal is getting you out of there. So my first question for you is what makes you unbreakable? So you've obviously made a breakthrough. How do you know, or how did you know that you were unbreakable?
Well, I think the way to answer that is I am breakable, but I don't stay broken. Um, and it gets back to what that 5% thing I believe in. That 5% of the people will do what 95% of the people won't do. I I humbly believe that I'm in that 5%. So you can break me for a short period of time, but I will come back together like the Terminator sort of, that guy in the Terminator comes back together. I will come back together, and I will learn from being broken, and I will move forward.
Perseverance.
Yeah,
I love
perseverance,
it.
right?
That's so good. Okay, Mike, what is one thing that's on your bucket list?
I would very much like to be a legit New York Times bestselling author. Like legit meaning I don't want to buy it. I want, I want to do something that's so good that people think that people, get me there. Um, that's a big challenge, I think.
That is fantastic. That is a fantastic bucket list item. I love that. And I have no doubt. I have no doubt that that can happen based on everything that you've done,
Thank you.
because people are already at your footsteps, waiting to hear from you every day about what's going on in your world, and certainly the people that you're engaging with. Okay, what is a self-limiting belief that you've had to overcome?
Uh, the self-limiting belief that I've had to overcome was the one I mentioned about asking for help. And I'd say I will add another one, and that is, for a long time I had what I call a perfect problem, um, where if I didn't think that something was done perfectly, I would not want it to be out in the world. And I've changed that dramatically where, I'm more of a good enough is good enough for now, because once it's out in the world will tell me how to improve it. And I was using the perfect problem as a way to just not put stuff out, not be scared that it would, to be afraid that if it wasn't perfect, it would reflect on me personally, and it would become a part of me, which is ridiculous. So that's how those are two.
Well, I've suffered that right alongside you.
Okay, good.
And I certainly have realized that focusing on perfect means you don't quite get much done, because you are ruminating over absolutely everything that needs to be perfect, and it takes forever.
Yeah,
So
it's being
you're
selfish
right.
in a bad way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really bad. You know, um, what could have been done in a couple months has now become a year, 18 months, 24 months. And in that time, you could have already gotten months worth of feedback from all kinds of people that would have been using your service or your product or something. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good one. Really good. Okay. What about on the opposite end of that, overcoming your self-limiting belief what's one of your superpowers? What would you say that you're really good at?
I think I'm pretty good at asking questions that most people won't think to ask. So not just in the podcast arena, but just in business or just everyday regular life. I just feel like I have a curiosity that takes me places that most people don't think to go. Um, and as a result, I can often get answers to things that um, other people won't get answers to.
Yeah, that's a good gift. When you ask good questions, you can get a whole world of information that can unlock quite a bit. So I would say yes, if you have that talent, then it can do wonders. Mike, if there was one last piece of advice that you could give to anyone listening, what would it be?
Well, I think it would be this. I have this chapter in the book called "The Five Words," and the five words is "My future is my property." And I didn't make that up. That a guy I heard a fellow named Dan Sullivan say that one day when I was driving in my car with a CD in there when people still listen to CDs, and he was telling a story, and he said, "My future is my property," and that struck me like a baseball bat across the head, because when I heard that, I believed that the future was not something that you could own. It was not something you could influence. It was something that just happened. And at the time that I heard it, I was in the valley, and I had been telling myself that, the future is going to be just like the past, and the past has been, gotten me here, and there's a lot of pain with that, and I don't want to do that. So why would I keep doing this if it's just going to be the same? So when I heard Dan say my future is my property, I it completely shifted how I was thinking, and it put the responsibility on me to be selfish, get selfish, you know, figure out the future I actually wanted, and then get to work making it happen.
Yeah, that's extreme ownership. And I love that. That is awesome. So, Mike, how can people follow you, get in touch with you, keep up with what you're doing?
Sure. My website is probably the best place to go. It's just my name, Mike Malatesta. That's MALATESTA.com. My podcast is there. My book is there. About me is there. My coaching business is there. Everything you want to know about me is there. And you can connect with me on my socials there as well. So go to my website. It's just my name, Mike Malatesta.
That's awesome. I like it when it's simple and it's all in one
Yeah.
place, which makes it so easy. to remember the 26 different ways that you can get in touch
Yeah,
with
right,
somebody.
sure.
It's all there on the website. Exactly, I know. There's just, there's way too many new social medias coming out faster than I can keep up with it. So,
Yeah, me too.
um, probably in a year there'll be someone that we don't even know about yet. The next wave of whatever comes after TikTok and all of
Yeah, there'll
that.
definitely be something, that's for sure. That is for
But
sure.
this has been a very enlightening hour. I'm so grateful for your stories that hopefully have inspired, not just inspired, but will activate
Ah,
somebody today. And that aligns so well with what I always say at the end of my show, which is you're your only limit. Take action. Like it's your responsibility.
mm.
We are the people that get in the way of us taking action. And once we eliminate that, we can move forward and do something. So you and I are aligned on that. So just thank you so much
Thanks
for
for
coming on. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on your show, Des. This has been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Mike Malatesta, phenomenal conversation. What a brilliant man, has done so much in entrepreneurship and is one of the first people that I've really spent time talking to that has sold more than one business and at a hefty price tag. Like I mentioned, 8 and 9 figure deals. So a lot of great learning. I hope you took away as much as I did from this episode. But what struck me the most, although I could pick many things, is the valley of uncertainty. The valley of uncertainty. I think it applies to entrepreneurship, certainly, but I think it applies in many other areas of life as well. It's very easy for us to get stuck and feel uncertain. It takes energy, intentionality, belief, grit, all of that in order for us to persevere, make some difficult decisions, and choose to have a breakthrough. So I would invite you today to think about where you're at in your stage of life in entrepreneurship, if that is the journey that you're on right now. Are you in the dream stage? Are you in the grind stage? Are you in the valley of uncertainty? Or are you in the breakthrough? That's ultimately where we want to be. And in order for us to do that, it takes us having ingenuity and thinking differently. So I'm happy to be able to recommend that book that I'm currently listening to. You can listen to it alongside with me. A friend of mine, Autumn. Hey, Autumn, if you're listening, she's actually the one who recommended it to me. So I have to give her that shout out. But Adam Grant, again, is the author. I really enjoy his content. Take a listen. It really is great for us to think about how we think and how to push ourselves to continue to think differently, because what we once believed may no longer serve us today, and we may need to adopt some new, revised, evolved thinking, as difficult as that may be, considering, look at the evolutions that we've gone through in the world. We're experiencing a world war as we speak. Well, a war, maybe not a world war, and hopefully it doesn't turn into that yet, but a war nonetheless, as we see what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. I would call, and of course now I'm getting into my personal opinion here, but that's okay because you've tuned in, and this is what you get sometimes. In my assessment, there's old thinking that is attached to the catalyst of this particular war. And so it is imperative for us to continue to think anew in order for us to get past and not repeat certain things in history. So I'll leave it there. This is not intended to be a political platform, although I did major in political science for anybody who was curious about that. But thank you for tuning in. It means the world to me. If you haven't yet had an opportunity, I would very much appreciate you rating and reviewing the show. It takes less than 30 seconds. Just go out there, especially if you are an Apple user, just scroll down there to the bottom of your podcast. You could see a place where you can click the star ratings and just write a few words about what you think about this particular episode or just the show overall. I appreciate you. Remember that you are your only limit, so take action today and tune in again next time for another inspiring episode that hopefully activates you here again soon. Thanks for listening.